Everyone would please rise. Dr. Kegler.
I'd like to have a moment of silence for Michael Kirby, who was a Freehold Township High School graduate and also an employee of the district for many, many years. He is a retired custodian. He passed away on January 21st. Thank you.
Okay, minutes approval. Please note the dates, December 20th, and the second minutes should be January 10th, not 31st. Could I have a mover and a seconder on the minutes, please?
I'll move. I'll second.
Mr. Hochberg, Mr. Bruno. Questions, comments on the minutes? Oh. Seeing none. Mr. Boyce?
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Kayazin?
I abstain.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Placatello?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes. Communications received are on file in the Board Secretary's office. Superintendent's report. Dr. Kaler.
Okay, before I turn it over to Mr. Boyce, and he's going to be going over capital planning, I would just like to send out a thank you to a couple of departments in our school district who over the past couple of days have been very instrumental in getting kids to school on time and getting the parking lots shoveled out, being on the phone with me at 3 o'clock in the morning and determining whether or not we should have snow days or we should have delayed openings, and allowing me to get the information out quick enough to all parents and to staff members. Mr. Burns has been just beyond great when it came to working with me all night long. We don't sleep. He's constantly calling me every hour or two until we know either the buses are out or that everything is done. The last delayed opening, he was down in transportation, actually still cleaning off the windows as the buses were going out on their route. And that was at 4 o'clock in the morning. And Pat Resnick, under Mr. Boyce's leadership, has been terrific in making sure the buses, with very, very little problems, have been able to get all the students, and that's over 12,000, to their destination and home again. So I just want to thank all of them, and Mr. Boyce too. Thank you. And Mr. Boyce? And I just watch the web page tonight, because tomorrow doesn't look like it's going to be another good day for coming to school.
Actually, Wednesday.
As the next step in our process, as a follow-up to our November 29th meeting where we took a look at the budget from a bird's eye view, is to focus on one of the things that I focused on that night, and that is our capital facility needs, the way that we approach this, how we've traditionally approached it, how the landscape has changed, and how we need to look at it going forward. First, let me introduce you to the project team, which is looking at this issue for us. And Robbie, we start, if you could introduce yourself to the board.
I'm Robbie Acampora from Capital Financial Advisors. I'm a financial advisor for school districts around New Jersey.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Gorab, our partner with Levent Goldman and Spitzer, and we are acting as the board's bond counsel with respect to this transaction.
Stephen Siegel, Spiegel Architectural Group, we're the architects in the district.
Good evening, Larry Ewer, Principal of Spiegel Architectural Group. Jim Burns, Freehold Regional Buildings and Grounds.
Okay, so this is the group that's been together in various capacities since the summer. as we looked at our facilities through a different lens than we have in the past. And just to quickly recap, what this district has traditionally done is set aside a certain financial level of effort in every year's annual operating budget to handle some of the big ticket facility things, replacement of a roof section or these boilers or this bank of windows, consistently every year so that our facilities are always in good shape. And as I had pointed out before, that one of the byproducts of that is that the district has not had a referendum since 2001 when we needed to build a new high school, and that's obviously something we're not going to accommodate in an annual budget. Tonight, what I want to accomplish is to give you an overview of the work we've done, of how we've assessed the needs of our facilities, and we're looking out over the next 5 years or so to say, what's going to come due in the next 5 years? What are we going to need to deal with in the next 5 years? To look at that, and also combine that work with the work that we had performed through a state grant that ultimately did not cost the district anything, was fully reimbursed, and that was the energy audit. Some good information came from there. And then also to follow up on the solar work that Spiegel Architecture had brought to us about 2 years ago in the first pass. Timing wasn't right. We didn't feel to pursue it at that time, but we're taking another look at that. So the overview for tonight, as you can see, just the screen orients us. The needs assessment, we'll talk about that. That's at the actual work that we're looking at addressing in this plan. Also, the financing options, that's part 2. There's 3 different ways that we can approach this. And finally, the course of action, where are we going to go from here? What are the next steps? As I said, the need assessment comes from a couple different sources. And what I've done is I've broken down the full range of needs into capital projects and energy efficiency. Solar energy is a supplement to that. Solar energy is essentially a way to pay for the capital projects that we've looked at. The energy efficiency component of this is, for the most part, the results of our energy audit. And those are things that we don't need to do to keep the buildings open, but they are things that we should consider doing because they result in a relatively short payback period because of energy efficiency. For example, if you change out bulbs and fixtures from one sort to another, the cost of that is recovered within a relatively short period through energy savings. So we're also considering that. Okay, so this looks specifically at the capital projects, and I'm going to ask the architects just to walk through this list and give you a sense of what each of these items represents. I mean, roofing and so forth is pretty obvious, but replacing the steam system or unit ventilators, I just want to give you them to give you a better feel for what that work looks like. Larry?
Thank you, Sean. Basically, this list had been derived from our initial talks with Jim Burns on what the needs of the district were, and we had divided them into these categories. Architecturally, we had looked at the roofing needs of the district, and basically we're looking at roofing needs throughout every school in the district. This does not solve all of the district's needs, but it does solve the majority of them, especially how it would impact potential photovoltaic solar panels on the roofs of these schools. Some of these roof systems are getting to their useful life and age, and others are just being repaired. They include a majority of them are built-up roofing sections. Some of them are asphalt roofing sections as well, pitch roofs. There's about 382,000 square feet of roofing we're talking here. That is less than half of the school district's entire roof systems. Window replacements would occur at 2 of the schools, Freehold Borough and Howell. As Sean had pointed out, the district in the past had replaced windows in a continuing series as the needs arise. This continues that need, the replacement of windows at 2 of the district schools. The EPIS and fascia replacement, EPIS is an acronym for exterior insulating finish systems. That is for a need at Colts Neck School. There's a section of wall that has been damaged and needs to be replaced is allowing water infiltration into the school. There's a fascia replacement that needs to be done at Manalapan and Freehold Township schools. The asbestos abatement number you see there, about $390,000. That relates to some of the pipe insulation work that would have to be replaced and some boiler replacements that go to the next section of the mechanical. There's several items here in the mechanical. This is really the bulk of the capital project work. The controls in the district are a myriad of different types of systems. A lot of them are called pneumatic controls, which is a dated system. The updated system now is called DDC, or Direct Digital Controls. It's an electronic system. Many of the district's controls now do not talk to each other. Many of them don't work accurately. Many of the systems, Jim is forced to manually control them. If you walk through many of the schools, there's hot sections, there's cold sections. That's because none of the systems are talking to each other. We really need a new control system. These are ventilators. It's typically a piece of machinery that you see in classrooms. It's the, for lack of a better term, the large box you see under a window in a classroom. That's a fully used ventilator. Many of them are in the schools are original and they're dated. There's a steam system in place now at Freehold Borough School. That's an extremely dated system. Most schools now do not have steam systems. They've been converted to hot water system. So this project would replace the entire Freehold Borough system from steam to hot water. Many of the districts need new boilers. This line item would handle replacement of all the district boilers except for Polsnet, of course, which is a newer school. It's not certainly at this point need a new boiler. So this would handle the boiler replacements at the other 5 district schools. Rooftop units, various items that need to be replaced here, either in media centers or auditoriums or just general areas. And there's a series of them at each school. We did look at each school individually and just selected HVAC rooftop equipment that needed to be replaced at this time. This does not replace certainly all the district's needs, and they're not all required to be replaced at this point. We're really looking at least 5 years out what needs to be replaced in the district. Plumbing, there are a few hot water heaters that need to be replaced in the district, specifically at Golden Snake and at Howell. That's that line item there. Communications, the $450,000, that is to replace the intercom and phone system at all the schools except for Howell, which already had their system replaced. And that, you see the total on the screen of approximately $27.3 million after the contingencies are included.
Now, you notice the asterisk here that many of these items also result in energy efficiencies because a boiler may be 25 years old, technology's come a long way. They're on this list rather than the energy efficiency list because these are things that, you know, in the relatively near future, we're going to need to address. It's not just for energy efficiency purposes, but they also have a pretty significant energy component. And what's the financial impact of all of this, inclusive of energy savings, is something that we'll discuss when we get to the financing options. The energy efficiency, this is relatively straightforward. Most of this is out of the energy audit. Again, these are things that are not required to keep the doors open, but things that make sense financially if you look at things over, 5 years, 10 years. The payback on this, the cost recovery is a fairly quick turnaround. Wherever there is eligibility for various rebate programs, both on this list and on the previous list of those that qualify for energy efficiency rebates, they're of course going to be taken advantage of as we move through the project. Solar energy, and again I'm going to ask Larry to talk a little bit about solar energy. This is now at this stage of our discussion, this is more about what it will actually look like, not so much the dollar end of it, the financing end of it. We're going to get to that. Just any questions generically about solar, how does it work, how is it attached to the roof, those types of things. Feel free to jump in and ask, but Larry, if you could just give us an overview to start.
Absolutely, thank you. We've looked at 3 different types of systems for the district. The majority of that is roof mounted. This is a system that is called ballasted system. It sits on a racking system that is ballasted to the roof. And what that means is it is weighted down to the roof. There are no roof penetrations, so there are no potential for leaks. Obviously, Obviously, we need to meet code for wind uplift, so the amount of weight that is on the racking system, ballasted, differs per area in the state. Some areas it's 125 miles per hour wind speed, other areas it's 90. It really matters on the wind speed or how much weight you have to put on the system. It is a slope system approximately 10 degrees to the south. Of course, the more south you are, the more energy efficient, the more solar gain we'll get from the panels. Again, the majority of what we're proposing is roof mounted. Some areas that do need to be replaced with roofing, we have included in the roofing section of the book about the capital project section. We certainly do not want to put a new solar panel system on an old roof. That makes no financial sense because we'd have to just take the panels off at a later time. The canopy mounts are parking lot mounted canopy systems. And these are systems that would be installed over parking lots, as the term dictates. They can be installed over islands or open parking lots. Again, the more southern exposure, the more energy efficient they are. The ground mount systems are just that. They're mounted on the ground on racking systems. Locations need to be determined. Of course, details such as do they get fenced in or what the ground cover is below the panels will all be coordinated with the district. Overall, our initial assessment on the size of the system is approximately 5 megawatts of power we're looking to achieve. That would address approximately, presently with the utility bills in the district, approximately 1/3 of the district's electric utility bill. Of course, that number would increase percentage-wise because of the energy efficiency we would realize from the other projects we've discussed today.
So less energy used, and the energy we do need to buy is cheaper. So really twofold there. Okay. Ground mount? Did you just? Okay. All right, any questions, Chris?
Am I correct that you can only pick buildings with north-south exposure, you can't go east-west?
On a roof-mounted system?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, the panels can be turned either direction on a roof, so we face them south. But of course, when we're looking at a roof itself, we need to look at many different things for shading. You can't put roofs on a lower section or a higher section would shade that section. You can't put them next to parapet walls that would shade the panels, tall chimneys, obviously trees, anything that provides shading on a roof, we cannot put in that area. Part of our analysis is to go on the roof and use a shading calculator that we have called a suneye and look at every section of the roof to find out where we can actually put panels. Obviously, rooftop equipment, we have to stay a certain distance away from rooftop equipment because that casts shadows as well on panels. But panels can be put just about on any type of roof. Even if the building itself is oriented east-west, you just rotate the panels on the roof.
Jim, are the majority of our roofs flat roofs?
Right.
The vast
Except
majority?
for Colts Neck, it's got some metal roofs. Most of the roofs are flat.
Right, so with the flat roofs, there's more ability to orient them, but when it's sloped, you kind of got to be facing south, right?
Right.
Okay.
How would, like, heavy snow affect these panels? Like, you're saying that you need a certain amount of weight to hold these panels down.
Yeah.
Would the roofs be able to sustain that weight plus additional snow if we had, like, ridiculous amounts of snow like
Good
that?
question. Your roofs presently are designed to handle snow load. Part of our analysis to look at the roof structure to make sure it can handle the additional weight of the solar panel and balancing system. These systems range anywhere from 5 to 9 pounds per square foot in a balancing system. So we look at the roof structure, do an analysis. Actually, we are required by code to provide a structural analysis to the state stating that these roofs can't handle the additional weight.
And that would be including snow as well, right?
Correct, oh, absolutely.
Do they still generate the same amount of power if they're,
No, obviously if snow is covering a panel, it's not generating.
any power?
I would say not. I mean, can light filtrate through inches of snow to some degree?
It wouldn't be an issue up until now.
Right.
It's something that when they're,
Snow does have a tendency to melt off the solar panels quicker. Certainly not 20 inches of snow, but a few inches of snow.
Sean, what's our current energy bill?
I don't know if Mr. Schimpf, you have that. Go ahead.
Approximately 4 million each year, but that's electricity and natural gas and supply.
Well, all right, what's the portion
portion of our energy bill that the solar panels will address by? That's the 33% number.
Of the electric portion of the bill, not the natural gas portion. But those are good questions, and when we get to the financial, we'll see how the energy savings folds into, how does this impact the financial position of the district? Okay. Let's move into the financing, and we can always come back to that as well. The financing options. There are three options that we're going to talk about. The first is the annual budget, and this option, what I'm saying to you is this is no longer a viable option. And a number of things have converged to make that the case. There's new budget law, so obviously there's a property tax cap of 2%. The state has taken some school district surplus and factored that into their budget. We can probably expect more of that. We've lost millions and millions of state aid in the last year, and we expect to lose additional state aid. School districts are expecting to lose additional. To what degree, we're not sure. Another important change in the school budget law, in effect from this 11-12 year, the year that we're putting together budget-wise forward, is that there used to be a cap waiver that would give districts some relief for capital-type purchases. So they used to allow you to exceed the tax levy cap to the extent that the district was willing to invest in their facilities. That waiver is gone. Most of the waivers are gone. So there's really, for all intents and purposes, a real 2% cap on the levy. And interestingly, as you know, the levy is only a portion of the revenue. There's a levy, there's a state aid, and then there's whatever fund balance there might be. But the two main players are state aid and tax levy. If state aid stays flat and the levy is only 2%, that's not a 2% increase in the overall budget. It'll be less than that. Okay, it's only a 2% increase on that particular item of revenue. So all of these things coming together really make it very difficult to do what this district has done in the past and provide that annual level of effort to maintain its facilities. As we discussed in November, we are expecting a considerable deficit in what our revenues are projected to be and what our expenditures are projected to be. And those projections are based on the current year budget, which do not include any money for capital items in the facilities, because we cut that out of the 10-11 budget. So there's zero in there. We don't currently have any level of effort in there. And I don't foresee us being in a position to put that forward again. So if there's one thing that I want to accomplish tonight, it's to make that point very clearly, that we need to look at other options for financing and maintaining our facilities in terms of these big ticket items. And we need to have a longer view than 1 year at a time. Which brings us to the other two options. Yes, Session?
When is the speech?
22nd of February. February 22nd, the speech. The statute says that within 48 hours of the budget address, state aid numbers need to be put out to the districts. So if the budget address goes off on February 22nd, we'll know by February 24th. Okay, so let's talk about the other two financing options. And Lisa and Robbie, I'll let you two take us through this slide, and you let me know when you're ready for the next slide. The other two financing options were, one is a bond referendum, and you're familiar with that is. The other, I'm calling for the purposes, other strategy, other financing strategy, which has several components to it, and Lisa and Robbie will cover that.
Thank you. So our charge as a collective group was, what are the ways to get this project done? And what are the legal implications and the financial implications on the district of options? And we came up with two options. One is a bond referendum, and as Sean told us, the other is an option whereby the district avails itself of three separate, distinct financing options to get it done. So we're just going to start briefly with the bond referendum. I'm sure you all know what that is. And it's an opportunity to go out to the public and seek voter approval to undertake major capital improvements and borrow, bond, is a fancy word for borrow, bond, the cost of the project to be paid back over many years. That option has one very distinct advantage that I'm going to speak about, and then Robbie's going to take over the rest of the financial implications of the bond referendum. State aid, as you just mentioned. The state provides to regular operating districts 40% aid on capital projects, eligible costs of capital projects. And in the past, the state has funded it at 40% since the year 2000. Prior to that, the law did not exist that gave you 40%. Your projects, as proposed, are all eligible for state aid. So we would anticipate that you are going to get letters from the state that says that all your projects are eligible for 40% state aid. What does that mean? That means effectively, if you have a $10 million project, the state is going to contribute $4 million to that project, and the local share, the burden on the taxpayers, will be $6 million for that example. Now, what has the state done in the past? They've fully funded it. But last year, with the state difficulty, they funded state aid at 85%, which meant if you're eligible for 40%, you really only got 34%, which is 85% or 40%. That was the first time in many years that the state had prorated facilities aid. Not operating aid, that's facilities aid. Prior to the new laws, the lowest the state had ever funded facilities aid was 67%, and that was 1 year. They had really been fully funding, and then I think during the Whitman administration, they may have prorated a little bit. But I've gone through this long analysis of state facilities aid to tell you that when we looked at your bond referendum alternative, we considered what would be a reasonable assumption for the state aid over time. We used 34% as that assumption, and our option that we presented to Sean on how this could work as a bond referendum. Why do we think that's conservative? Because the state has never underfunded state aid for that length of period that you would issue bonds, 20, 25 years. So we believe that's a very conservative assumption that the state would contribute 34% of your project costs to a bond referendum. And Robbie will pick up the other benefits of a bond referendum, and then we'll go into the other alternatives.
There are a number of revenue offsets for the bond referendum. Excuse me, Lisa just spoke about the biggest offset of the 34% debt service aid. The second offset is for the solar part of the project. Probably about 6 years ago, the state of New Jersey started a program because they wanted to try to obtain, to generate 20% of clean renewable energy by the year 2020. So there are incentives out there for municipalities, school districts, entities to be able to put solar on and have the state try to have districts get the ability to offset those solar programs by selling renewable energy credits. So energy that's generated from a solar system, you get credits and they're sold on the market. They're sold to power companies that have to pay a penalty for not generating clean renewable energy. So once you have solar panels on the buildings, you're going to be able to generate these solar credits and sell them on the open market. People are going to buy these. You have the ability to sell them for 15 years from when the solar panels are installed. This is it's a great program that New Jersey has developed. There are other states that are copying it, but it's a huge generator for the district to be able to generate to offset the money to pay the solar panels and also to pay for other projects. A number of school districts have been able to do this and to really finance other projects in addition to the solar panels. The revenue from debt service aid and these renewable energy credits and energy that you're going to save from the solar panels together will be able to, over 20 years, we projected a repayment term of selling bonds for 20 years. You're going to be able to pay for all of the projects that we've talked about before and generate in excess of that $215,000 a year on average. So all the projects, the roof, the all the roofs, the solar panels, the energy saving projects would all be financed. And there'd be an extra $215,000 approximately on average per year available for budget relief. Other programs, however the district chooses to do that. I guess I'd like to emphasize these renewable energy credits are something that's there now that we can take advantage of. If they weren't there 7 years ago, not a lot of people did solar, but New Jersey is only second behind California in the number of solar panels that are. It's kind of hard to believe that we are. You know, think of New Jersey as being the place where a lot of sun is generated and people are putting solar panels up, but these incentives really put you over the top with installing solar panels. And the solar panels, the architect can correct me, have a useful life of 25 to 30 years. So you're going to be getting that energy and save that money, the energy money, for 25 or 30 years, because the panels are going to still be generating electricity. These renewable energy credits are only good for 15 years. We projected to sell the bond for 20 years. So you're still going to have savings well after the bonds are paid off. The $215,000 that I mentioned is an average over 25 years. So you just think about it in those terms. The challenges with this bond referendum is the uncertainty of state aid that Lisa spoke about already. And the second thing is that you have to go to bond referendum and have the community support. But the big advantage is this excess, to be able to have all of your other projects financed and still have something left over for some relief, which I'm sure every school district needs.
So in the net to the good, the net effect is not only does the projects get taken care of, but we're in addition a couple $100,000 to the good on average per year. So that's the referendum scenario.
Sean charged us with finding another way, and what would be the implication of another scenario. We really had to think about 3 different distinct options to get this entire package done, because none of them fit perfectly in one. And I'm going to say what those 3 are, combined together, because as you know, this project is somewhat of a puzzle. These roofs and the solar kind of fit together with the energy efficiency. It's really kind of a puzzle that fits together. It would combine the use of a power purchase agreement, an energy savings incentive program, and a capital lease, which is a 5-year lease. And I'm going to explain each of these, how they would work together and what they would finance. A power purchase agreement, you're going to hear people call it PPAs for short, is an agreement, a contract that the board would enter into with a private vendor. The vendor agrees to construct, install, operate, and maintain, and own solar panels on your facilities. In return, you pay this vendor a price for the electricity produced by these solar panels. They're private companies, they own them, they operate, maintain them on your facilities, sun shines on them, produces energy, he sells that energy, or she sells that energy to you at a reduced price per kilowatt hour than what you're paying now. These agreements can only be entered into, they're performance-based contracts, if they save you money. If you had perfectly new roofs, and you were to enter into a power purchase agreement, and you were paying maybe 16 cents per kilowatt hour, we've seen power purchase agreements that we've done, we're seeing 5 cents, 6 cents, 7 cents. So you can see the delta of about 10 cents. 10 cents for a third of your energy is a lot of money. It's going to produce significant savings. But what districts are trying to do is get something else financed with a power purchase agreement. And in our combined strategy here, we would need to get the roofs financed through a power purchase agreement structure. That means that the vendor would also have to, this private company, do the roof improvements, install the solar. What does that do to the private company? It means they have to borrow more money and do more work. What does that mean for the price that they're going to charge you for electricity? It means it's going to go up. It might not be 5 or 6 cents. I'm making these numbers up. It might be 12, 13, 14. We don't know. But what we do know is this process needs to be bid for a competitive contracting process. And we are in the process of looking at other districts who are trying to include roof improvements. We currently have some assumptions built into our pro forma that's producing a result. We're assuming you're going to pay 5% less in your electricity cost per kilowatt hour. But there's some fine tuning needed to be done when we look at the market and see districts that have included their roof improvements through a power purchase agreement. I am certain that you have had vendors come to you and say, we'll do your power and we'll pay for your roofs and you'll pay for nothing. Make no mistakes, you are paying for your roof. You're just paying for the electricity cost as opposed to a capital cost. So that's part of the solution in this scenario is a power purchase agreement where you can get some of your roofs done, not all that you plan. The second part of this would
Can I
be...
interject for a second?
Sure.
Go on. The power purchase agreement, this vendor is going to get those renewable energy credits that we're
Right.
talking about.
The SRECs go to the owner of the system. So in a bond referendum, you're the owner of the panels, you get the revenues. You do a power purchase agreement, the private entity gets the revenues that you would otherwise have gotten. Presumably they pass along some of those to you, but we don't know that. It's a private entity with profit margins, and so we'll never really know the amount of benefit that you get from that. So that's one piece of that solution. The next piece is an energy savings incentive program. That is a relatively new law that allows school districts to issue debt without voter approval to finance projects that save energy. The requirement is that the savings from these improvements has to at least equal the bond payments. So essentially, the projects are done at no cost to the taxpayer. Your savings have to pay for the cost of the improvements. You've had an audit done, we've looked at the savings, and we've looked at the projected improvements, and we fit into that second part of that equation as many of the energy savings improvements that we could. The third part of the puzzle is sort of the bottom of the waterfall. What couldn't fit into the power purchase agreement and what couldn't fit into the energy savings incentive programs because of statutory requirements would be a capital lease. It would be a 5-year lease. And that is part of the windows, part of the roofs, and there may be a couple other improvements in there that could not fit within the first two options. That's just a 5-year lease that's paid off over 5 years. For the first two, the power purchase agreement and the energy incentive program, you don't get any state aid. The state has made the decision that they don't want to fund the energy savings improvement programs with state aid because you're not getting voter approval. And the first, of course, in the power purchase agreement, you're not incurring any debt obligations, so there's no state aid for that. So the capital lease, which is a smaller amount in our analysis, a few million, would probably get state aid of about 34%. We use the same percentage. Some of the advantages of this is that this is a solution which, while involving voter input and public hearings, does not technically require a vote of the public to approve it. It's a process and a program that the board can undertake through board action. Some of the disadvantages, it completely fails to take advantage of state funding that's available. That 34% is essentially a coupon. And we were talking about this before. If you're at the ShopRite and you have a 34% coupon and you choose to use it or not use it, certainly you're going to pay it less if you use your 34% off coupon. That's essentially what that 34% is. You really do lose it to a great degree in this option. The state will not provide aid. Again, the SRECs are also not an available option to you. And then the portion of energy savings that is really enjoyed by the private entity as opposed to you. But again, the advantage is you are incurring less debt in this option. You are incurring debt, but less debt. It is not voter-approved debt, but it is debt nonetheless. And it can proceed forward with board action. So Sean asked us to do this analysis. We have pages and pages of assumptions. And how does this option affect the district? Again, this option gets the entire package done. This option costs approximately, over a 25-year period, an average of $1.1 million a year. So this exercise that we entered into with respect to these two possible options really showed a financial picture of how these two options affect the district. The one, bond referendum, being a positive of about $215,000 a year. This alternative, still getting everything done, but costing about $1.1 million per year. And that is pretty much how we lined up the options in terms of overall impact on the district.
Let's stop there and open it up. Questions from the board. I guess our message is, although the mechanisms are different, the bottom lines, there's a real contrast there. Referendum, we're to the good, a couple $100,000 a year. Referendum, we're at a cost of just over $1 million a year. And why? Because of we're going to leave most of the state aid on the table. That's one of the big reasons. And also, we don't maximize the SREC energy savings through the PPA agreement. Most of that would go to the private entity, and what they're getting paid for is because they're coming up with the capital. That's what we're paying them for. Okay, so we don't have to come up with the capital. They'll do that for the solar component in some of the roofs, but that's going to cost money. They're in business to make money. If they have the capital, we're going to give up some of our benefit to do it. So these two scenarios, let's just make sure we're clear on those. Tom?
Just, with finances, you have to talk slowly. The referendum will do everything we needed to do and develop a solar program. Give us $215,000 in revenue, income, and have no tax impact.
No. No. The referendum option looks to, it issues debt.
Right.
Okay, now, how are we going to pay for that debt? If the board has the flexibility to take that SREC revenue and those energy savings and say, I want to use that to offset the debt. And if they choose to do that, there'll still be $200,000 to the good.
Right.
It also has the flexibility to use that benefit to further preserve programs and services if it should choose to. But if you look at the financial position of the district as a whole, as a single financial position, then that assumes it offsets the cost of the debt. And yes, we're to the good $200,000.
I have a question. I guess I should ask you. The current administration in New Jersey, I don't trust them so much when it comes to public education. How sure are you that, we're going to get this 34% state aid? I mean, is it possible that they could just say, no, we're not going to give you that like they've done in other cases?
Well, let's just talk about that, because you're sensing what's very important. That state aid is really driving the bond referendum option as being a better financial picture. So I have to tell you a little story then. Before 2000, districts like your district really didn't get any state aid for capital projects. You were a wealthy district. You really got no aid. In the year 2000, when the governor wanted to provide big funding for having districts and capital needs, the legislators who represented districts like you said, no way, we're not going to let you fully fund the Abbotts unless you give our district something. So they wrote the legislation so that districts like this district would get 40% aid, and the Abbotts would get all of their facilities paid for by the entire state. That was the legislative compromise made. But before that law went into effect, you got nothing. I'm assuming, or very little aid for capital projects and bonds. But for districts that did get aid, for example, maybe a Carteret, or a district that wasn't, or a Passaic, or a district that had different economics than this district, they would get a set percentage of aid every year. And in March, they would be informed by the legislature how much aid they were going to get. So they were told, okay, You have $100 in debt service, the state's going to pay 50% of that debt service. Before the voters went to vote, you knew how much debt aid you were going to get. And every year it changed, and it was usually what's called CFA aid. It was usually what your aid percentage was. And during the Frhsd administration, when times got kind of tight in the state, the legislature prorated that aid. They started at like 80-something%, and then they went to 70-something%. The lowest year ever was 67%. Then we hit the year 2000, and this new law is enacted, and every district is supposed to get their fair share of state aid now for capital projects. And from 2000 until 2010, that law was funded. And if you did a project, you got 40% aid if your costs were eligible. 40%, 40%, 40%, 40%. Last year, the state entered into a fiscal crisis, and the governor and the legislature determined we can only fund state aid at 85% this year. So 85% of 40 is 34%. And that's what districts got last year for aid. And so when you ask me, how certain am I of that 34%? I don't know. I don't know how certain I am. I would like to think that the governor will keep a facilities aid level at least 34%. But understand the assumptions that we used in our analysis assume it would never go back to 100% funding again. The lowest the state has ever done in 1 year was 67%. We're assuming 85% for 20 years. We're assuming they're never going to fully fund again. Now, we talked about this in our last meeting. Well, we did a financial plan for this meeting, but we're going to further tweak these numbers. Should we use 30%? Should we use 32%? We can adjust this and see a sensitivity analysis to that state aid. I can't guarantee that the state's going to give you 34%. I can tell you something, you're going to get a letter before you go to referendum, because you have to, if you decide to go to referendum, that where the state awards you aid, we should know at the end of February where they're going to fund aid this year for capital projects. So I think over the next 2 months, we should get a lot more information about aid and be better able to answer your question as to the near future of that aid. Sorry for that long answer. It's a lot of information.
Any other questions on these financing scenarios?
That's a minor question. Given the significant square footage of putting one of these panels on a school, who usually pays for the due diligence on the potential health effects related to these panels to give the parents peace of mind before those kinds of things go on a school at that size and level?
I'm not sure I understand the question. What do you mean the health effects from the panels? Radiation?
We're going to get a lot of questions from parents who are going to say, if you put this much this square footage on top of a school, does it have any potential health impacts as it relates to the children in the school?
Honestly, I've never been asked that question. I don't have an answer for it. I don't know of any health-related concerns there are about putting solar panels on roofs.
Anybody here going to ask that question? Guaranteed.
I'll ask that question before we bring it back to you. I'll ask it.
Who usually pays for that kind of due diligence?
I'm going to need to do some research. I've never been even asked. There's never been a concern. I've never seen a white paper written about health concerns on solar panels. So
I'll answer that question also.
First question, any damage to them, where is that funded? Is there an insurance policy that covers? Is that all involved with the whole project?
if you're talking about in the referendum scenario where you own the panels, you fall under your insurance. It's now part of the building. For a power purchase scenario, you don't own the panels.
So it's their responsibility.
EPA provides.
Vendor, the private company, or whatever.
We did, when we completed the financial analysis, include a percentage for maintenance during the life of the panels. There's not a lot of maintenance that has to be done in we tried to be conservative and include something in here for as an offset to the energy savings for some maintenance allocation each year.
No, I had mentioned it before, one of the colleges has them as canopies in the parking lot, and the baseballs are constantly going over the fence and hitting them. So, it could be all spring in some.
Well, the
Location is important, the way the schools are set up and where their fields are and everything.
The schematics that we've put together really tries to take advantage of all reasonable opportunities to put solar panels, and it does to some extent include canopies over walkways
Right.
and parking lots, and in a very limited way, some ground mount as well. Financing options, Mr. Lawson?
Sean, the total in the three categories is 57.7 million.
Correct.
Assuming all the numbers stay the same and the 34% comes through, we would actually have to issue bonds for 38 million roughly.
No, actually, you issue the bonds for the full amount, correct? And then we get state aid annually for debt service to pay down the full amount.
Yes, there are two options for state aid, grant or debt service aid. There is currently no grant funding in the works. There's a fourth grant that's supposed to be coming, but your projects are eligible for debt service aid, whereby the state pays that amount every year as opposed to upfront.
Great, okay, so course of action from here. Like I said, one of the main things I wanted to accomplish tonight was to rule out one of the three options, and that's the annual budget. First, for the reasons that I covered earlier, it's just no longer a viable option. I also need to get it off of the deck as we get into the real meat of our 11-12 budget development, which the series of meetings from here till the end of March, you'll see, are going to be full of issues. The projected deficit that I talked about in November did not include any additional funds allocated for capital planning. So if we were to go with an annual budget option, it would exacerbate that problem. It would make it even worse. So if we can rule that out, and if we can say either the referendum option or the other combination of strategies are two things we're going to fully explore and make a good informed decision on how we're going to finance our facilities long term. That's the one thing that I really wanted to accomplish, along with giving you an overview of what the project is, and right now letting you know what are the things that need to happen from here forward. Probably the most important thing is we need to find out from the state whether or not they're going to be giving us debt service to support this project, the 34 cents that Lisa talked about. And our sense is that that's going to happen in the next 30 days or somewhere reasonably within that time, that the state is preparing to send out those debt service letters. So that's obviously a very important component, because without that, then we look at these two things, the difference in impact on our financial position, which right now is, different between these two options. Well, that changes, and they're probably more in line, and we may look at things differently. So we'll know that information by the time we make a decision. Also, there are currently some PPA proposals out on the street, and Lisa, maybe you can speak to this, that are, by out in the street, I mean bids are being solicited. And we're curious to see what they come back in as right now, so we get a feel for what the market condition is.
Right, a plain vanilla PPA that just has solar, well, they're being done every week. We have results for those. Those are we're reasonably able to predict what you'd have to pay for that. But I guess this is not a plain vanilla PPA that's part of your proposed solution. It's a power purchase agreement where you're also getting roofs. And a lot of people have talked about them, but not many have been done yet. So we need to look further to see the next few that are up in line to be bid, if they are bid, to see where those prices come in. And how much of a price do you have to pay to have a private entity pay for and install new roofs? So we're going to look at that, and this analysis will be further refined and re-presented to you once we have more of this information.
So as those two things come to us and give us some more comfort level on the assumptions that we're using, one of the other things is that a number of the municipal planning boards have reached out to me as part of the process to at least get in line for state aid. As you know, we submitted applications representing these projects just to get into the mix so that we could get a determination. Not that it obligates us to move on with the project, but we do need to know whether we could get state aid. But as part of that submission process, copies of those schematics are sent to each of the municipal planning boards, and they have a 45, 55-day window to review it, and it's more or less a courtesy review, and they can submit comments to DOE. They've reached out to me, and I'd like to go and meet with them and provide them any information and get their input to bring back to you for your consideration. And that'll probably be happening anywhere over the next 30 to 45 days. Most of the planning boards have a meeting. So that's another thing, another source of input we can get from those groups. From there, you know, we'll advance you some more specific information regarding the scope of the work and the financial arrangements and the assumptions that we've used, and you can take a look at that. There's some additional scope of work that we considered on a much smaller scale, probably around $2 million, that are for projects that don't quite fit into this category of, you know, things we need to take care of. Things like track repairs or field improvements or other things of that nature that are not eligible for state aid, so they need to be part of that application down to the state to get in line for that. But those are some other things that we're also going to bring to you for your consideration in developing a final scope of work to move forward with. So once those things fall into place, we can have, you know, a better look and proceed from there. My sense of the timeline is, for referendum, there's only certain dates during a year that you can have a referendum. We would be targeting September. If we're going with a referendum, if we go with that option, I would recommend September. I think the timing of that lays out to just where we need it to be. The other combination strategy, we have more flexibility on the time, and we can develop the program to move through that process and put that in place and finalize the timeline there. And also prepare, I have up here, community education plan. So those are the things that we're looking at. Just to recap, to responsibly maintain our facilities, we need to put a long-term plan in place of how we're going to handle this. To rely on an annual budget, we're going to fall short because we're not going to have the kind of resources that we need to do that. Once we've come to terms with that, then for the next 2 months, we can concentrate on the most pressing issue, and that is finalizing our 11-12 budget without this additional strain on it for these capital projects. So that's the one thing I wanted to do, and also just make you aware of the different financing scenarios. So I hope that we accomplished that. Any final thoughts from the panel over there? Okay, Mr. Burns?
You know I have to defend the facilities here, Sean. That roof number there, the $4.7 to $5 million, that's not roofs that are failing right now. Some districts, the roofs are failing and they need to replace this dollar amount. What this is going to allow us to do is to warranty and replace the roofs under the solar panels, so they'll last the life of the solar panels. And if we have a roof now that maybe has 10 years left, you know, we'll do a study, we'll see if there's any dampness. If not, we'll take a layer off, put a layer on, and we'll be able to warranty our roofs for the life of the solar panels. So, you know, I have to defend the facilities here, but it's a good way to fund them and save energy for the next 15 years without killing programs into the regular budget.
Well, first of all, you should be proud of the facilities here, and that's actually a good point on the roofs. It's not a full tear off and replace all these roofs. There are some of our roofs that are included in that number that are at that point in their lives. But there are other components, as Jim was saying, that we're just going to, and they may have 10 years left, we're going to do something that extends that another 10 years. Therefore, it lines up with the lifespan of the solar panels. So it's a good investment, good return on our investment.
When do we have to decide between the two?
I,
When do you think? By?
Well, for a September referendum, I think we have 60 days comfortably. I think for the next 60 days, February and March, we're going to be focused entirely on the 11-12 budget development. Okay? And correct me if I'm wrong, if we May, June, say, okay, we're going to decide what direction. If we choose the referendum direction, we have no trouble making the September referendum, right?
We're going to want to take some time in late spring, early summer to do the community outreach education. So that's really what would drive getting to September.
So budget first, and then, April, May, June, this and the voter education aspect of it.
Well, well, maybe this police or Sean, is there a way to hybridize these two proposals, maybe bring in a piece of the PPA picture, maybe reduce the amount that we need to issue bonds for, just something to...
No, we actually talked exactly about that. There are pros and cons to that, as there are with any of these decisions. Because with the PPA, remember, you do know some of the financial benefit in exchange for somebody else providing the capital.
Right.
While I understand that the smaller the referendum number, the more likely it is to be approved, if we're going to provide the capital, that's really the piece that provides us the most return, if we can come up with the capital ourselves. But we will look at that at a hybrid and let you know how it
It
goes.
seemed like the ESIP portion of the overall PPA proposal seemed like it could be standalone.
There are elements of your ESIP that can stand alone, yes.
The ESIP has to, really, it's got to pay for itself. Those
Yes.
improvements that are financed with the ESIP have to pay for themselves.
Right.
But you wouldn't get any of that debt servicing on those projects.
That's a big amount of money, and remember with the ESIP, because it's not voter-approved debt, you lose the state contribution.
What is the debt term for an ESIP?
It's called a refunding bond, actually.
So it would be an entirely separate debt issue?
Yes, it's a
And
bond.
it actually is part of your operating budget too.
I understand how it's going to be
Yeah.
repaid and it's from that pot.
Right.
But, and just thinking this through, the combination of referendum, which is the issuance of debt, but pulled out of that in ESIP, I'm issuing debt in two
Right.
different, okay, so that's what.
There'll be two different kinds of debt, because the ESIP is less acceptable, I don't want to use that word, it's not as favorable in the market as your general obligation bond, so it would probably bear a slightly higher interest rate.
We'll look at it though. We'll look at it.
We'll know more about the PPA certainly as we go 30 or 60 days. You'll be able to refine that part of it.
All right, great. Any other questions from the board? Okay, everybody comfortable with this course of action? Great, great.
Anything else under superintendent's report?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, moving right along. Board reports. Do we have any board reports tonight?
I have one, Mr. Lawson.
Yes, sir.
The policy committee met again tonight, and we, among other things, discuss our concussion policy, which is under review, as well as our heat acclimation for athletes, especially in the August months. So we will be sending something up to you shortly for the board to review.
Great, great, thank you. Anything else? Okay. It's time for the public participation portion of the meeting. Let's get right to it. First on the list, Gloria Close.
You're only going first because you've been here since 5 o'clock.
You're not kidding. I didn't even get a bottle of water. I'm just teasing. I'm teasing. Yeah,
See that vending machine out back?
the policy meeting actually ended at 6:30. I was looking for some sort of material I can read. And I stumbled on this magazine in the hallway. It's called the Falls Neck Journal. On page 59, I just glanced over it, something caught my attention. It says here, new superintendent name. I remember Mr. Lawson at the last meeting, you will not disclose because there was a problem, the contract negotiation has not been finalized at the time, and you said that it will be, the public will be informed once all of this is settled. And then unfortunately, the county superintendent was asked not to come back by Governor Christie. So we were really in a limbo. But what was shocking on this article was the announcement was expected, I'm just gonna read a few paragraphs here, was expected at the November 20 Board of Education meeting, but Board President Lawson told the audience the announcement will be delayed until contract negotiations with Mr. Simpson could be finalized. On this paragraph here, the reason we choose Mr. Sampson is that he has a clear vision for the future, said Mr. Christopher Placitello. Why was this released before it was even disclosed to the public? It was put on the paper on this thing. Well, I thought you have not made up your mind, because like I said, he came from a small district, and we have a problem because these two supposedly candidates come from a very small district, and we have over 10,000 population. So the money was an issue here, and it was supposed to be decided upon by County Superintendent Carol Morris. But unfortunately, like I said, she was asked to leave by Governor Christie. So we have not heard yet from this new appointed, I believe he's SURF or something, the new Secretary of Education. And all of a sudden, you read something, really, it's a smack on the taxpayer. Why am I reading this? You were supposed to announce this in public, who will be, if there's any, who will be appointed as the next superintendent. Why in the paper? Why Mr. Placitello is saying he named the guy? That was a little bit shocking. My next question, on this attachment, you have Sharp Jennifer, Sharp Jennifer, Sharp Jennifer. 3 occasions for this professional development, 315, 520, 330, total of 595 in that short period of time. What is her position in the district? Next question. On page 20 of the agenda, you mentioned about the SICA. You know, I'm not going to be naive to hide how I feel about the position. Is that about renewal of contract, or are they getting a raise? Can we hold up raises because of the financial uncertainties this district will be facing? You just had a big explanation about bond referendum. You can answer that later. Now, can I speak now on the presentation? Can I make a comment? Okay.
Sure.
When you showed the capital projects, you had a total there of 27,000, and you enumerated the items there. I don't know whether this is for one school. I assume this is only for one school. What's shocking here is every budget year, it is just proper to allocate money under the infrastructure line item. When you're talking about 27,000, just taking the figure there, we couldn't allocate that money the past 3 years, 2 years, last year, to fix some of our problems of that project. I mean, what happened to all the money that was allocated on that line item?
It's 27 million.
Now, on the state aid, wait, I put solar energy. I remember 2 years ago, there was a presentation of the, 2 years ago, there was a presentation, solely by these people, solar energy. And I remember, I was there, nothing went, it was stopped right there and then. Nothing happened. We never saw the final report why it was canned. Project was totally dismantled. And there was not even a report that came back to the public as far as what was the outcome of the study. You were the board members, remember? Mr. Wassa brought some people here. They had a big presentation in solar heat. And after that, what happened? There were a lot of questions raised there, but we never saw anything in black and white after that. And I'd like to know, how much money are you talking about that you're gonna borrow, the bond referendum? Is it 49? Is it 50 million? Because no matter what, this is still a borrowed money that we have to pay. The solar panel, we have no guarantee. We can recover everything to pay what we owe. Because there's another thing on part 2, where we can rent our roofs to some companies who might be interested, but in return, we can only have a reduced cost for our fuel, reduced. We're not getting anything free, in spite that we're letting them use those, put their panels on all our school roofs. That's a question to me too. I mean, like I said, there's so much to us on this that I hope you people don't jump into making decision on this bond referendum. No matter what, I think this has to be discussed fully in public. And the public should really be given participation. Because I was sitting there. My head was this much, though I understood most of it.
Can I just say something? And
We're just starting.
This kind of goes against...
My time is off for a while, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, it is.
It's critical because I was shut down last time.
We did say something. We just did a 40-minute presentation with question and answer, so we tried to be proactive in answering your questions. It's very difficult to have it both ways. You can't say we dropped it 2 years ago, when we've been looking at this on and off for the past 2 years and researching it, and then say, but don't rush into anything.
No, Mr. Cayasso, I didn't say, I was just
want.
curious. What happened to that study then?
It's taken time to come to the table.
2 years ago?
I mean, sometimes things, are driven by other decisions.
I understand, because at the time after the presentation...
That drove this decision to get into this process now. I mean, you can't say we dropped it then, but don't do anything about it now. Don't jump
No, I didn't say drop. I said there was a study, there was a big presentation on the solar heat.
Just a point of information.
My concern was only to find out what happened to it. How come we were not privy to the outcome of the, whatever they found out? Okay, I did not say you knock it down.
Thank you.
And I think the board should look into this, because this should have been announced in public. We waited. I attended all the meetings on this election. You were down to 2, but you were very discreet not to announce in public. And all of a sudden, I was just right there sitting down and I read this. This is really devastating. Where is your, I mean, is this confidential that it was disclosed to somebody?
You have to shut her up.
And Mr. Placitello, your name was here.
That's a mistake.
We're all aware of the article. Don't think we're not aware of it. It's just because you read it out there doesn't mean we're not aware of the article.
This is the first time.
Right.
Listen, Ms. Levine, this is the first time I read it. I was trying to kill time. I stumbled on this magazine, but I was shocked.
Oh, we.
Okay, I guess.
Mrs. Close, thank you very much.
Good, okay.
Thank you.
And we will have public hearing on all this. You're gonna answer my question?
Yes.
The amount of money
Yes,
for
we will.
Thank you.
Yep. Shirley Lou?
Shirley Liu, 10 Marion Drive. On January 18, Frhsd Regional School District had a 90-minute delay opening. My daughter attends high technology as a freshman. Freshman parents of Monmouth County Vocational in Manalapan were not informed that the First Student Bus Company will be running on the Frhsd Regional School delay schedule, despite the fact that Monmouth County Vocational School is starting on time. My daughter only learned the night before from another student that her bus will be running late the next morning. At the beginning of the school year, there were no advanced knowledge to parents, especially to freshman parents, that we were to follow the sending district school schedule, despite the fact that Monmouth County vocational schools were opening on time. We had no prior knowledge. It left me at a loss as to what to do. Like most parents, we expected the bus to arrive at the usual time, but since that was not the case, I was left wondering how I were to get my daughter to school on time without her missing the quiz she had in first period, while having 2 younger children in grades 4 and 6 to get up and out of bed and ready to catch their bus. I believe Frhsd Regional School District Transportation is responsible for fulfilling my daughter's right to an education. But the current transportation plan that we just experienced in the last 2 weeks the education of the Manalapan students attending Monmouth County Vocational School District has not been a priority in my opinion. When my daughter realized she had to wait for the delayed bus, she was not happy. Frhsd Regional School District clearly left the Manalapan students behind to fend for themselves to get to their school on time or choose to wait for the bus that may or may not arrive as scheduled, and she would have clearly missed at least the first 2 periods of her class, including her quiz. Before the start of the school year, the bus cards did not arrive in the mail with any other information stating what the plan is in the case of inclement weather. There was nothing. There was no communication. There is also nothing in place that warns me that Frhsd Regional School District, the sending district, will be opening on a delay or will be closed due to bad weather. I feel that all Manalapan students attending Monmouth Vocational should be on the automated phone chain since Frhsd Regional is the sending district and responsible for my daughter's transportation. They should inform us that the district will be changing the school schedule for whatever reason. This is what I'd like to know. Who was responsible for making sure parents were aware of this protocol or the current system in place when Frhsd Regional School District had a delayed opening, is closed, or will have an early dismissal? For the many phone calls I made to both districts and First Student Bus Company, I got nothing but finger pointing. Who in Frhsd Regional Transportation is the liaison working with the Monmouth County Vocational School District? 3, I'd like to request that the Frhsd Regional School District reevaluate the transportation currently in place for students that attend Monmouth County Vocational, and to see if it is possible to provide transportation to these students in Manalapan regardless of the Frhsd Regional School delayed start time or if it is closed. I'd also like to request that the phone numbers of the students attending Monmouth County Vocational School District be added on the Frhsd School phone chain. I am here to speak because I feel the Frhsd Transportation has not given the priority to the education of the students in Manalapan that attend the Monmouth Vocational School District. I'd like to see Frhsd Regional School District and the Monmouth County Vocational School District come together to see and discuss, to have a dialogue to see if this can possibly be changed. I have called the Monmouth County Board of Education and spoke to the transportation coordinator there. They said that this can be changed. So right now, my final question is, who here on this board may I continue this discussion with so I may see some results? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Villari? Good evening.
The reason we're here is...
Could you just state your name and residence?
Sorry.
That's okay.
Mark and Cindy Villari, Howell. And the reason we're here is our children attend school at the FPAC and the Humanities program, so it's not their home school. So they have the bus transportation, and I apologize for bringing it up in this forum, but we've made numerous phone calls, and I sent a letter to Mr. Boyce and also to the superintendent's office, and nobody ever calls us back, and I'm going back. The letter was in October, and we've made numerous calls. We talked to Mandy and Colleen in the office, and they said that someone would get back to us. Nobody's gotten back to us yet. And the situation... Since September.
Since the first week of school.
The reason that we're here now is because in another situation, my son had just dislocated his shoulder, and the reason that we're here to explain is that the bus used to pick up our children in front of the house. My other daughter's been in a specialized program. We've went through transportation, and transportation directed us to go to the superintendent's office, for which, again, we haven't gotten any response. We've been told that there is specific bus stops, and that's it. There's no explanation. It's very reasonable to pick up our children. We're in the cul-de-sac. It's actually shorter than the way the bus goes, and my wife was told that it doesn't matter if it takes longer to get around. That's just the rule. That's the way it is.
The quote was exactly, excuse me one moment. I asked, you're telling me you'll go out of your way, you'll drive all the way around the block just so you don't pick up near my house. And she told me, absolutely. Just so we don't pick up anywhere near your house, we'll go completely around the block to pick up away from your home. And I just don't understand whose purpose that serves or what, how that benefits anyone. They're not picking up the whole development. They're picking up 2 children, that if they pick them up here, they have to stop, or if they pick them up here, they have to stop. It doesn't matter. And I can't understand the reasoning to why I can't get a response that makes just common sense. The bus is just coming to pick them up.
You know, if it was said that the district is saving $50,000 or something because they're picking them up on the, you know, the corner rather than to come and pick them up in front of their house, I can understand that. But we're not being told anything. And, you know, again, my son just dislocated his shoulder. So again, we went to the Howell School and asked, you know, is it possible for the bus to come down the block? It is the winter. We don't want him to slip and fall. And they're, you know, they called and talked to, I guess, the person in charge of the busing, and the message that was left back to us was no, that they can't. If you're worried about the safety of your child, you drive him to the bus or drive him to the school.
And the bus comes at 6:40 in the morning. It's pitch black at 6:40 in the morning. It's deserted. Nobody's out, and it's freezing cold. I know that my other 2 daughters went to their home school. They waited at the bus stop with all the other kids. I've done that already for 8 years. I understand that. This is a completely different situation. They're the only 2. That's it. It's them. It's cold, it's dark, it's icy, it's snowy. I don't see the purpose.
And again, this has been something that's been in place. When you go to open houses for the learning centers, they tell you that your bus will pick you up in front of your house. You know, you're going to get a special bus. Again, they're small buses, and I don't see that we were told if we make one exception, we have to make all exceptions. Well, I don't. They should make all exceptions, because it doesn't seem different that they would pick you up in front of the house, or that why would they have to drive past your house and stop at the corner and then have to, you walk down there. It's one stop, it's one person, it's not like it's a group of children. And again, these are, it isn't the whole group, it isn't the whole community. It's dark in the mornings, and there's 1 or 2 children out there, that's it.
Excuse me, if I can just, since my son got hurt last Friday, I decided to follow the bus route, and I did. And I called up Pat Resnick's office, and I did find out the route, you know, what the stops were, say, Laurelwood and Cottonwood, which it would be the same thing. I'm on Honey Locust and Arbor. It's the corner. And sure enough, my kids were correct. They do pick up in front of someone's house. Instead of driving all the way down Laurelwood like they do at my house, turn around and come back and pick up a child on the corner of Laurelwood and Cottonwood. She makes the left into Cottonwood, which is common sense. That's exactly what she should do. Pick up the child and drive around and come right back out. Common sense. She made a very wise choice there. She did the right thing, the bus driver, even though that's not fair to me, because on the bus stop, it's Laurelwood and Cotton, no exception. Honey Locust and Arbor, instead of going all the way around the block to Arbor, why can't the bus just come down, turn around, and pick up at the end of the development as opposed to the corner? It has to turn around either way.
So we're in January now, so I ask you to please, if there's nothing that you can possibly do except tell us, no, we can't do it without any excuse, at least consider it as the board and discuss it, so maybe they can give the specialized learning centers back that next year. And also for the children's safety in the darkness, when there's only 1 child going to the bus stop and they have to walk all the way up the block by themselves.
What I'm going to do is ask Mr. Boyce to look into the situation. Transportation is part of his bailiwick.
I've met with Mr. Boyce before. I've sent Mr. Boyce a letter. I've never received a response back from Mr. Boyce.
Okay. Would you follow up with them?
Certainly.
Thank you. He will follow up with you.
Thank you
very
for your
much.
time.
Thank you for your time. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Could that be a side of the street issue?
No, I'll adjust it at the end.
Bob Walsh.
Good evening, everybody. I don't mean to smile, but it's nice sitting on the other side.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it
Bob?
really is.
Isn't
It's kind of enjoyable, you know? I'll try to have my turn tomorrow night. I'm here as a father. My son, Sean Walsh, has been in the district for many years now, and the last 6 months, besides being the worst 6 months I've ever had in my life, have just been pure hell on him. Between being in institutions, sleeping in psych wards with him, having the police at the house, being turned away from hospitals, being turned away from receiving the help my son so desperately needs at almost every turn, facing a system that is just so failing special needs children that are in crisis. It actually sickens my stomach, what I've run into. My son needs help desperately. I came here tonight because I don't want to hear anybody say that, oh, we didn't know. Finally found a place that will accept my son. A bed became available last week. It's available Thursday. Letters have been sent to the school board. Letters have been sent to Dr. Hazel, Dr. Kegler. I need a reply immediately. Bed's available Thursday. If he's not occupied by Friday, there will not be a bed. It could be 2 to 3 months. My son's 16 years old. He's 5'11", 180 pounds. He's autistic and he's having meltdowns that are unbelievable. Last Sunday, out of the clear blue, he attacked me. I was on the ground and straightened for 10 minutes. After I finally let him up, he put his fist through another plasma TV. I've watched him rip doors off the wall. Hinges still in the wall. I've come home and seen him trying to rip down a fence to get at my wife. I've watched him attack strangers. I've watched him attack my wife, my daughter, myself. Went to hospitals and gotten turned away, saying there's nothing we can do for your son. He's autistic. He's 16 years old. Between puberty, the medications, it's like a Molotov cocktail in him. I mean, I've heard many, many times in rooms like this, it's all about the children. It's all about the children. Well, my son's one of those children. I am being as probably reserved as I can be from what I've seen. God forbid if I didn't have the will, the knowledge, the money, the time, where would I be? And still, it's a crisis and there's no place to address it in the state of New Jersey. I'm begging you for help. I've been here before. About a month and a half ago, 10 days later, I spent 2 nights sleeping in the psych ward. I spent Thanksgiving in the psych ward at Monmouth Medical, and then Carrier Clinic took my son for 2.5 weeks to babysit him, to give me and my wife a mental break. Carrier Clinic is not for special needs kids who are autistic and having violent meltdowns. There's no place in the state of New Jersey, just so you know. There's going to be an epidemic in the state's hands with special needs children. They know we're 1,200 to 1,500 group homes short. They're closing facilities as this aged population of autistic children are getting older and older. I sure hope that boards of education, teachers unions, NJEA, and everybody gets on board for the children. For the children. There's a lot of people that are not in my position that are getting worn down by this fight. And it's, I can tell you now truthfully that at times when I'm on the ground with my son, holding him, when he feels no pain, no fear, he's got a 48 IQ, and he's trying to bite me, headbutt me, pinch me, anything to get free, to get his hands on anything to swing at me, it could be a life and death struggle. I need your help. And if your answer is no, that's acceptable. I know what I have to do from there. I mean, I have till Thursday. I did speak with Dr. Hazel today. You've been very kind. You really have been. Dr. Kegler, I know this is a tough situation. All right? I mean, believe me, with what I've dealt with the state and everything, being thrown out of one hospital because my son wasn't poor and on Medicaid. No, you have insurance, your son's not allowed here, we'll lose federal aid to a place that would have detoxed my son and rebooted him up on new medication. Could not go into that facility, they would have lost federal aid. Being told by the head psychiatrist at Monmouth Medical, there's nothing we can do for your son. They admitted him for 8 days in October because my wife was calling Channel 12 from the psych ward. Go to Jersey Shore Medical and be told there's nothing we can do for your son. Carrier Clinic babysat him. Okay? My son is not a bad kid. He's autistic and he needs help. And I've come here just to ask. I need action. Even if that action is no. I just need action so that I know what I have to do. I mean, I don't think anybody will fault me. I don't think any of you would look at me and look down on me for doing what I have to do to help get services that are needed for my special needs child. I pray that all of you would do the same for your special needs child if you have one. There's a crisis coming, folks. And you are on the Board of Ed, and I've heard many times in rooms like this, it's all about the children, or they're the children too. Okay? Please, I've given you the numbers. I have until Thursday to bring my child. Friday, I lose that room. It could be 2 to 3 more months before another bed opens up. And you know, something has to change in this system. And I sure hope a lot of you are on board. I have listened to a lot of you do a lot of positive things for children in your districts, in your schools. I mean, you're some good people. All right, I know you're not sitting up there because of your high paid. You can pay a lot of money tonight. I mean, I know the drill. Okay. But there's a void in our system. There's a huge void. And I believe there'll be some dire consequences if some of these things don't change soon. And something has to change here in these rooms. Please, I don't beg for much in life. I mean, usually whatever I wanted to do, I'd go after, I'd pray about it, I'd work hard, and, you know, Lord blesses me either way. My son needs help, and this is of no fault of his own. And he's not a bad kid, but I need you people to help. And then there's a lot of kids after him that's gonna need your help. All right? When I hear that phrase, for the children, they're the children too. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob. If you would, follow up with Dr. Hazel. All right?
I'll reach out to Mr. Walsh. I'll follow up with him.
Please do. Thank you. Andrea Giannopoulos.
Just wanted to thank you. Actually thought that presentation was very well done. I found the second strategy actually very interesting and creative, means of possibly financing the capital expenditures of the district. Just wanted to make you aware of one thing as you really think about these two options, just a tidbit of information that's current and recent. In the summer of 2009, Colts Neck put a brand-new roof on one of its schools, and that roof was failing. It was a $1 million project. It was not financed with debt service. However, it was eligible for facilities aid, and the district did apply for that 40% aid at the time. The grant was approved at the time. We are now approaching February 2011, and we have yet to receive that money. So we are still waiting. It is a year and a half, and we are waiting for that $400,000. Very recently, we received a letter from them saying, after both our business administrator, myself, our superintendent, constant phone calls to the SDA, that's the School Development Authority who approved the grant, constant phone calls back and forth for over a year. We went out to the public at the time. We told the public that we had the funds to fund the project, but that we would be getting back 40% from the state. And we did the project, and it was a failing roof, so we had to do the project. And we did the project with funds that we had at the time. But under the guise that we would be getting back that $400,000 in a rather quick fashion. And we are here now in February. We have been told that everything that needed to be done is done, and we should be seeing the money. But I just want to make you aware of that as you look, into these decisions. This is the reality of what's going on. And I thought your panel was excellent, and their explanations were excellent, but this is the reality. This is a case that's happening right here in one of your K-8 districts. And it's been a year and a half of waiting for that 40%. And it's not 80% of the 40%, it's not 34%, it's zero. We have seen zero for a year and a half. So just keep that in mind. Otherwise, good job.
Thank you. Nancy Locascio?
Doesn't that make your evening?
I just have a quick question, actually, to follow up to your first speaker. I would love an update on the superintendent search. I know that there's lots going on out there, and there's obviously information in the papers now about who you've chosen, but you haven't come out publicly. You can come out publicly and say who your choice is, and then that's the direction the board is going without a contract. It's just a vote of confidence that this is a relationship that's going to move forward. We all read in the paper about the Toms River superintendent that was no contract, just an approval by the board. So I think at this point, I remember I emailed all of you on November 19th about what my opinion was, and since then, I've heard nothing about who the superintendent of schools is going to be going forward. And I know all about February 7th, and I know all about the deadlines, and I know all about the caps. I serve on a board, all about that. So I would really appreciate as a parent in the community, I would really appreciate an update on on the superintendent approval process. And I also should let you know that Colts Neck Schools just delayed their opening tomorrow morning, so I don't know. You guys got to get out there. I know.
Why tomorrow morning? I thought it would have been Wednesday morning.
I know, we're just a bear of good news. Well, you probably want to get out of here soon to see what the weather's like.
I thought it was tonight, 10 o'clock until Wednesday morning's going to be great.
Wait a minute. Are you going to use his name?
Well, it's out. What's the difference? What's the difference? Put it in there.
Well,
get on, please.
Okay. Mrs. Close.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. I just want to point out one thing based on something you read from that magazine. If you'll recall, on that night in November when I said that I could not disclose any information about the superintendent, I did not use a name. Oh, okay. Just wanted to be sure.
No, she's saying you did.
It's in there.
It's in there.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. The, professional development.
I'll wait till it's done.
Oh, you want to take that one?
Hello, Mrs. Close. On the professional development, you referred to Jennifer Sharp. Jennifer Sharp is an administrative supervisor who is in human resource, and with the down in central office staff that we've had from last year to this year, she has also been wearing different hats and working in curriculum as well as in student services. She's attending the 3 workshops to get herself familiar with the federal grant programs that come in for Title I and Title II. She's also attending the tenure and seniority seminar and the latest legal developments to bring her up to speed of any changes in tenure law or riffing or anything that we do in staffing. Yes, Mrs. Evangelista also oversees the title grant and the federal programs.
There's a couple on there for me.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mrs. Close, as I spoke to you briefly before the open session of the meeting, and I invite you to come up, and I know there's a lot of questions that you have about the referendum, and maybe if we sit down together. We can cover some of them, but a couple of the points that you raised, let me address. You had said the number 27,000 is 27 million was the number you're referring to. I just to make sure, 27 million. When projects of this size are not meant to be funded in a single annual budget for big ticket items such as this. If we're looking at 20-some million dollars worth of work, and that's exclusive of the solar energy, it's just not something we can fit into an annual budget. Also, the solar program that you had, excuse me, hold on, let me finish. The solar program that you had mentioned that came before this board a couple years ago, and you referred to a study. There was no study at that time. There was no cost incurred to the board. The board did not engage the architect independently, made an assessment and made a pitch to the board. We did not feel at that time, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Wasser, but I can recall us talking about that was right at the time that the economy had really hit the wall, and we just didn't feel it was the right time to pursue the solar project at that time. There was, like I said, there was no cost incurred by the board, and as we look at these projects and as the budget landscape changed, we're taking another look at it, and we're going to try and pursue it. So again, I'm available to speak to you more if you have more specific questions. Mrs. Liu, you raised excellent points. I can tell you that a little bit of the history of why, and the question for the board is, why is it that if Freehold Regional Schools have a delayed opening, that we then take kids to the Voc schools late, as if they had a delayed opening when they very well may not have a delayed opening? The origin of a lot of that is that we had primarily in-house contractors, in-house drivers, so all of our routes were tiered. So if one moved, the whole thing needed to move, and that's the origin of it. I was not aware of that situation, to be perfectly frank with you, until that happened that day. And we're making a strong push to reevaluate that, and let's look at tiering routes in a different way, so that, because it doesn't make sense on the education side. I understand the transportation that's causing it, but your points are well taken, and we're going to address that for future years.
I mean, they must have been 90-minute delays in past years, but there's no system in place to let the parents know at the start of school year.
Granted.
This is what should happen, so.
I didn't even know, Frank. I didn't even know, so.
What's going on?
No, your points are well taken.
And Mr. Boyce, we'll also include all those students too on the phone.
Right, that's another good idea.
Take care of that piece of it too.
Regarding the other transportation matter that was brought before the board, just one important piece of information that those parents did reach out to Dr. Kegler's office, who then forwarded it to me, and it's at that point my charge to follow up with it, not the superintendent's charge to follow up with it. But regarding that situation, and you may have heard Mrs. Valeri note that we actually met. She and I actually sat down and met to discuss this situation. And we've seen a lot of this year. As you know, we made some pretty significant changes to our transportation. For the most part, our students were picked up at or very near their home. All students, not just Learning Center students, but all students. We made some changes going into this year, where we said we're bringing everybody to corners, and certain things like cul-de-sacs, we say, as a matter of policy, we're not going into cul-de-sacs, unless they're so deep that they're, a mile and a half down, but most of them are fairly short. We said our target was going to be, we felt that it was reasonable to ask students to walk up to 3/10 of a mile, actually up to 5/10, although our target was 3/10. So we have this type of situation where when you look at it in isolation, it's easy to make the case that, well, your bus is going right by my house, why can't you just stop and pick it up? It doesn't cost any money. Or you can go down my cul-de-sac, it doesn't, but you need to extrapolate those decisions to the entire population, and that's when it does impact us. And as the mother said, she followed a bus and she found another bus stop where a kid was getting picked up at their house, and that's exactly what happens. So it's very important that we're consistent with these decisions. If there is some unique, like her son is injured in some way, so that's a unique temporary situation that we can look at in isolation. But it's important that if we have certain parameters, like it's fair to ask the kid to walk 3/10 of a mile, those I think are reasonable things that we need to stick by. Okay?
I don't agree with you, only because, initially when you do it, that's fine. But a bus driver knows where they have to go. This is a small bus, they know exactly, and they get to learn where the kids are. Not that they have to go out of the way to pick them up, but you kind of learn. And in this instance, it seems like it's easier just to go around and pick them up. You got to turn around anyway.
And I will tell you, and the board can make that kind of decision, but there's a consequence to it, because this room will be full of people who say, you did it for them, now you have to do it for me. I can tell you, I hear
You
it
got to go by,
all day.
Was she saying that those are the only kids that are picked up?
Right, and we
It's a
get
small
that,
bus.
right, but kids come and go. The idea is to create a bus stop plan that will stand the test of time. Okay, kids come and go.
because sometimes they have a ride and sometimes they don't, and so you
And
never
even
know if
from
they're
year
going
to
to be there or
year,
not.
kids move in and move out,
So
okay?
we can make an exception while he's hurt to help him out?
Well, if that's preventing him from getting to the bus stop safely, I'll take a look at it. But-
6:40 is dark, still dark out.
Right, and many of our students, our kids are heading out to the bus stop when it's still dark out.
Yeah, I know, but they go in a group of a lot of people.
Right.
Usually there's a lot of kids, if they're just the only ones that...
She walks up 5 miles and stands at the stop sign, which is not covered with snow, and standing in the street in the middle of the dark at 6:50 a.m.
This is not...
By herself. She's the only child on that minibus.
So,
She's not in a group.
okay?
Okay.
I just want to follow up on that. And I think that was all that was for me.
One more question that you didn't answer, on page 20, H5, was that are you visiting the contract, or what is it all about? Are they asking for raises? H5, not page 20.
The unit is the Seekers. They bargained collectively, they became a unit, they bargained collectively, and the Board of Education and administrators bargained with them, and this is the result of the bargaining of a contract. The proposes, once the board approves it or disapproves it, the case may be, then it becomes public as to what their increases have been in this contract. Until then, it is not public. It is a matter of contract between the Board of Education and this unit. Okay? It is a new contract between the unit and the Board of Education, the district.
Okay, so they're working on a new contract.
That's correct, it's a new contract. Some time ago, the Board of Education discussed at a great length the new superintendent and who that person should be. The Board of Education made a selection at that point in time, and then a contract has to be negotiated between that individual and the Board of Education. The contract was negotiated and was submitted to the state of New Jersey through the county office for approval. The superintendent designee at that time requested of the board, and the board president has been following that request, not to divulge his name until the contract has been approved by the state and approved by the board. That's what he had requested. I'm not addressing what happened in the magazine. I know nothing about what happened in the magazine, et cetera. I'm just saying what the request was of the superintendent designee. I'm sure you all read the newspaper and find out that the whole area is in a state of flux. I use that term pejoratively. What's happened is that the county is not approving anything, the state is not approving anything, and therefore the contract is lying there on the state's desk waiting for approval or disapproval. The Board of Education has been aware of what's going on. There are ways the contract might be changed so that we are sure of approval, and when that case comes, and hopefully it comes very soon after February 7th, we'll then be in a position to divulge who it is. I guess it's no secret at this point in time, but for that, I'm not going to comment on, okay?
Can I comment?
It's like shocking.
Can I comment?
That he came to here and every time, every meeting
I'll comment.
was here. He came with his paper.
No, I'll do it.
Okay.
What?
I'm just telling you the status of the contract right now.
No, I'll address it. Can I comment? I go? The fact that it's in the magazine is my fault. I apologized already to the board. I received a telephone call. It was already known to the reporter. I answered the question at work when I was in the middle of a bunch of things. I probably should have thought it through a little bit further, and that's how it happened. The whole set of circumstances, frankly, is extremely frustrating. I lost track of things while I was at work. It's that simple. There's no excuse. I apologize to the board, and to the extent that you are offended, I apologize to you. More than that, I can't tell you.
It's not offending. What happens
Okay.
if the contract fails? What's going to happen? Are we going to be sued because you disclosed the name?
I don't think so.
I think that we are attempting to work it out with the state and with the superintendent designee. And we will know certainly by the next meeting in February, we will know exactly what the status is. That's all we can say at this point in time.
There's a lesson. Never take calls from reporters at work.
Information from a closed session was...
That's enough, lady.
I'm sure this was discussed in closed session, right? Was it
It was in closed session, and the name publicly has not been released. That is correct. At the... Yes, it was.
Isn't that a violation completely, disclosing anything in closed session?
Well, we're not sure how it got disclosed to the reporter.
Pardon me?
We're not sure how it got disclosed to the reporter. No.
She already knew.
He said he knew. He said the reporter knew the name and asked him for a comment. We don't know.
Okay.
We don't know. I mean, it's very difficult when the board is discussing a superintendent designee, how it's going to remain totally confidential after all this time. The board president has done exactly what the designee has asked for and not divulged the name.
If I could just make some quick notations on changes in the agenda. Professional development, we've added a couple more, corrected a couple of my misspellings. So the revised version is in front of you. It's also on the table in the back. And in addition, Dr. Kegler had handed out some revisions to the following pages. And Dr. Kegler's, make sure I get through this properly, page 6. These are changes, Dr. Kegler,
Yeah,
or
this is correct.
additions?
No, these are, looking on page 6, Jeffrey Levine, add the UPC code under that is the position that he is filling, that was left off.
Do we have to scan him?
He does need a barcode.
Let me, if I could just quickly, the UPC is unique position code. This is something that came out in the accountability regulations recently that required schools to, report out on the number of positions in the district in a certain manner. We've chosen to include them on the agenda just because it helps us identify them.
Page 7, add steps 4 for the, under the honorarium of Cold Neck High School baseball for boys. It should be step 4.
Oh, I'm sorry, which
Blank.
one was that?
Iacello. Iacello.
Iacello,
You're
and
right.
I think he should be, there should be a number there, but please put step 4 in there. On page 9. Freehold Township, I hope you can see it's going that way. Wagon Blast Katie, add step 2, and the salary of $6,587. Okay? I think he's kind of hanging there without a...
Oh, yeah, I got it.
You better come back and do it. Page 15. One more here. Laura Terminella.
Says it here.
Please change your name to Laura Brady.
It says it right here.
Instead of Lauren.
Right.
Dr. Kegler?
It's already there.
No.
Katie Wagenblast, I actually know the girl because she's a graduate of Brick Memorial High School. Is that boys or girls lacrosse? Because she was a pretty good girls lacrosse player. I'm just wondering.
Katie?
Wagenblast?
Yeah, I think that's boys.
Okay, just checking. Because she was a pretty good girls lacrosse player, so I'm just wondering.
Maybe that position wasn't open, you know. Yeah. It is?
Oh, this
These
is,
are township? That should be girls? Okay,
It's a good hire.
okay. Well, on either
oh,
one,
so both of them were girls.
yeah, so on either one, she's a good hire, for boys or girls. Either way. I feel you say it's girls?
And also Brian.
I know Brian was the girls' coach last year, so I'm only assuming that.
Okay.
I think the heading may have dropped out is what happened.
Something screwy there.
I believe the heading may have dropped
Because
out.
we got 2 head coaches.
Right, above
yeah.
Brian's name.
Marlboro gets a
Yeah,
ping
the
pong
heading
table,
is
2
out.
of them. We get 30
All right.
Ah,
Let's approve it as lacrosse girls.
Girls lacrosse, and then it's Brian and Katie into that.
Right.
okay.
Okay, what page is that contract on? 'Cause I changed my mind. 20. I think she is. Yeah.
I know I don't want to approve this guy. No. I'll tell you what. All of a sudden, it didn't appear on the agenda to be reappointed. So I said, okay, it's taken care of. I'm here. Last year, he got the job at Frhsd. Because the because the town, he was released at Cold Neck, you know. So I gotta send it back. I gotta send it to executive.
Okay.
You have
Okay.
to send.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Someone's gonna take off.
We are up to our agenda.
Mr. Lawson, just one other thing, if I may.
Yes.
On the recommendation of terminations, on page 4 and 5.
Right.
The first one will use the initials AF,
AF.
and the second one, the initials TW. That's It's under H1, the last one under H1.
Bottom of page 4, top of page 5.
Correct. Thank you, sir.
Anybody have an objection to moving the entire agenda?
No, I have.
H5 we have to break out? Okay, forget it.
Or you can move everything except that.
Yeah, but
What's
you-
H5?
Just break one out and do the rest.
What is it?
Do H1 through H4. And then people can make objections if anything.
Do I want to just remove him or table the whole thing to executive? I mean, you know, I can't. I can't. An appointment. Yeah.
You can't make a motion to table it.
You can't make a motion, ask for a motion to table. You can't make that motion, so ask for it to table that.
Okay.
After you move the resolution, and ask to table that.
Right. I don't know. Okay. Sorry. Oh, man. All right, so we want to do H1
Through H4.
through H4. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I'll move it.
A second.
Moved by Mr. Bruno, seconded by Mrs. Canario. Discussion, questions, comments? Where did everything go? Oh, man. Okay, could I ask someone to please make a motion that we table H2 to executive session for discussion?
I'll motion it.
Thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Thank you.
The entire H2.
I think that's the easiest way. All right.
Okay.
What do we table?
Bill and Elizabeth.
Oh, because it's written wrong.
You seconded. Oh, I'm sorry, Bill and Jen.
Because that's a gross.
Take a vote on the table.
Okay, on the motion to table H2 until it's customary to the later this meeting or to another meeting?
I think we can dispatch it pretty quickly.
Okay, till later this, for consideration later this meeting. So to table H2, Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
I'm just curious about why we're tabling.
Discussion.
I requested it to discuss an executive session. And
Okay.
it's, you know, it's personnel.
Okay, yep, no problem.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses? Mr. Placatella?
Yes, as long as the discussion's not tonight.
Ms. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the remaining motions H1 through H4 exclusive of H2? Sorry, that's really
You got it.
your spiel.
H1, 3, and 4. Okay, seeing none. Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses? Mr. Placatella?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes. H5. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
I move it. Second.
Kathy, Chris.
Kathy Heshi.
That's right.
Lavin Moses. Discussion on H5. Well, I got something I gotta say, unfortunately.
Go ahead, you first.
No, you're not gonna like it.
Well, because I changed my mind.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Will you go first?
Well, I just, after explaining it to me, and when we were sitting there, and I was all confused about how they were getting that longevity and all, and Kathy did a good job, and I changed my mind. That's it. So I'm going to vote yes.
Well, what I was going to say was that in 19 years as a board member, I've always been able to, felt comfortable that I could defend any vote I made, look anybody in the eye and explain why I did it, and be comfortable doing it. Well, I'm going to make a vote tonight that I can't say that anymore. Enough said. H5.
No further motions, I'm sorry. Okay. Mr. Bruno?
Present, not taking action.
For the record, it's more than that. Mr. Bruno has not been involved in any type of discussions or consideration, has left the room whenever this has been discussed.
Thank you.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
I have to say no.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Placatella?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, I1 through I4. Mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Mr. Kayaza.
Second.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Sotera. Discussion I1 through I4. Anybody? Good grief. Seeing none. Mr. Boyce.
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Placatella?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes. All right, K1 through K19. Mover and a seconder, please. K1 through K19.
I'll move it.
Mr. Bruno, seconded by Mrs. Lavin. Discussion on the Ks.
Comment. Just wanted to mention, a lot of trips, but not much expense for the Board of Education, which I give them a lot of credit for all their fundraising.
Get out every weekend, no matter where I go. One of the schools is fundraising for something. It costs me money.
Okay.
Before we go any further,
Yeah.
K-19, I'd like to notice that Claude Jones
Very
paid
nice.
$3,000 girls field hockey state championship team to get their rings.
Is that it?
Wow.
So that might be somebody who might want to, maybe we should
Drop a letter.
get to know this guy.
Is his daughter Brittany Jones?
Yes.
Yeah, I know him very well.
I just want you to know that.
It's a heck of a donation.
Tables, I got books.
Okay, K1 through K19. Mr. Boyce?
Mr. Bruno?
Yes.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yes.
Mrs. Canario? Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses?
Yes.
Mr. Placatella?
Yes.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes.
I just want to say, in case that camera's checking me, looking at my phone, I'm checking the weather.
It's not snowing yet.
Okay, L1. Mover and a seconder, please.
I'll move.
Second.
Kayaza, Sotera. Discussion L1. Seeing none. Mr. Boyce?
Mr. Bruno?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Kayaza?
No.
Mrs. Canario?
Yes.
Mr. Hochberg?
Yes.
Mrs. Lavin?
Yes.
Mr. Moses? Mr. Placatella?
Yep.
Mrs. Sutera?
Yes.
Mr. Lawson?
Yes. Okay. Now,
Well, we're going to have some old new business.
Now.
Mr. Kayaza?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick statement for the record, for the public. I've already made the statement in executive. For personal reasons, I've chosen not to be a candidate for this seat for the next term for Frhsd Township, representing Frhsd on this board. It's been a heck of a ride. It's kind of been a Dickens novel, you know. It's been the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. But I could say, without a doubt, some of the best work I've ever seen done in my life, I've seen done in this room in this district by these people. And I mean, by these people, I mean my colleagues, stakeholders, you people sitting in the audience, and teachers and administrators in this district. I have unbounded respect for what you do. It's been an honor to serve, and I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much, and I got another 2 months for you guys to yell at me.
Thank you, Tom, for your contribution. Old business.
I just have one thing. Last month, we mentioned about the RFP for representation. Has anything happened with that?
Yes, today was the due date. I have received proposals, and I understand that there's a committee that's been identified, and I'll work with the board president to get that information out to the committee, and they begin their work. Thank you.
Okay. New business. Any new business before the board? Okay. We do need a brief executive session. I promise brief. I don't know if I can do that, but yeah, I promise brief. So would someone please move? I move so. Thank you. Second. Second. In favor?
Aye.